Hello everyone, welcome to our Rhash-Algo channel. In this video, we are going to talk about variables in Python programming. Variables are containers for storing data values. They allow programs to store information that can be used and modified later. There are different types of data storage and data types available in Python which can be used to store and can be assigned to variables. For example, numerical values, strings, and so on. For example, if I want to assign a value to x, like x equal to 5, I can do something like this. And if I want to assign a name to like Elias, I can do something like this. And as usual, we can do updation and modifications like and assigning of the values to the variables. If you don't know me, this is Rajesh Paleru, and if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, here is the LinkedIn URL. Let's get started, guys. There are certain rules and conventions to be followed while we are giving namings to the variables. What are those? Let's open command prompt to see with some examples. I can open Visual Studio Code, but the problem is we can't execute that as and when the program is or the statement is written. I have to run that specific file to find out what happened with that specific line of code that I have written. With this IDE, the benefit is that as soon as I write some statement, I should be able to get the output immediately, and that will be very easy for me to debug and to find out what happened with that specific line of statement. Now let's start with the rules. What are the rules? A set of guidelines for naming. What are those guidelines? Let's look at some of those guidelines that we have to follow while give a name to a variable in Python. Okay. First rule is it should start with a letter. For example, name. In the name, I am starting it with N, N-A-M-E, equal to or hash algo. It works. Second rule is it should start with underscore. Underscore name is also allowed. Or hash algo or hash algo. First rule is it should start with a character or a letter. And second rule is it should start with an underscore. Okay, can it start with a number? No, not at all. Starting with a number is not allowed in Python. For example, I am giving like 9 name equal to something like this. See, it is saying syntax error, invalid decimal literal. So that means I am starting with a number and it is getting confused thinking that I am giving a variable name, but it is considering as integer at the beginning of the character. Then I started with a string which is a character n. Then the interpreter what initially thought was it is an integer by looking at int class, but after finding the name n character, it was unable to identify what that is. It's not a decimal character, right? It is not a decimal, right? As I mentioned, yeah, as soon as it finds 9, int class is trying to find out and check if it is a decimal value. But the second character, which is n, based on that, it is failing. It is throwing an exception saying that it is syntax error because invalid decimal literal. That's the problem. Okay, what is the fourth rule? Can contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Okay, I just now told you you should not start with number, but it can be part of any other location except the first location. For example, N9 AME, sorry, RJSH algo. It's allowed, right? See, it is considering that name. And again, full name, full underscore name. I have name a variable name as full underscore name, right? It can accept underscores as well. Okay, full underscore name. And letters, as usual, these are all letters. So this rule is already mentioned. Okay, these are the rules, guys. And what about conventions? What is the basic difference between rules and conventions? Rules is like these are the mandatory stuff that we have to follow while giving a name to a variable. But these are conventions, which means recommended practices, which are nothing but best practices. For example, if you take like this, I have name in snake case format, which means the name is given with underscores, like country name, country underscore name, like this, for example. Anyways, it had thrown an error because I didn't define that variable. That's a different story. I'm not going to talk about that. I will come to that point at later lessons or later lectures. Okay, that's pretty much with the rules and conventions. Now let's move on to the next slide and talk about what it is talking about. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, Python has different types that we can use as part of the data definition. Okay, there we talk about data types. There are 4 primitive data types in Python, which are nothing but integer, floating point, string, and boolean. Let's look at some examples. Now I will clear this. Now I will start fresh, and I think some issue with the slides. One second, guys. One second. Please stay tuned. Okay. 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 What is the first one? Integer, right? X equal to 5. What is the type of it? X int. If I want to print that, X. If I want to print in the programming, I just need to use print X. But in the IDE, I can just use X so that it will be printed here. And if I want to define any floating point number, floating point value, X equal to something like 3.14. X equal to like that. And type of X is float. See, it's saying that class type is float. And if X equal to something like this. Okay, X can be printed like this. And if I want to see the type of that specific variable, str, string. Okay, and now the fourth one is boolean. Okay, type of that is, okay, and if I want to print that like this. Okay, that's pretty much about data types, guys, which are in Python. Okay, and okay, now if you see this, I'll come to this one more time. Okay, what is that about? Variables assignment and reassignment. Okay, here if you see clearly, I have assigned a variable value like x equal to 5. If you observe here, I am reassigning, which is nothing but changing the value. Same here, x equal to Rajesh. I am changing the value of it. So this is called assigning and this is called reassigning, which is nothing but I am able to modify the same variable with a different name, different value basically. And at the same time, I am not defining any data type, and built-in functionalities or built-in classes like str, bool, int and float, they are internally determining what is the type of that specific value. For example, in this case, if you see, it is determining the type is float, just like that in str case also, in case of bool also, right? And assignment can be done like some variable and a value, that is called initial value setting, which is nothing but assignment. Reassignment is for the same variable I will be using a different value. Okay, now let's talk about scope of the variables. So there are two different scopes, local scope and global scope. Let's see with an example. For this, I want to open Visual Studio Code. Yeah, here it is. I didn't open this guys earlier. Sorry for that. Next time I will have everything ready so that I won't be wasting your time. What happened? Yeah, it's here. It's here. Oh, I already had it. My bad. Okay, I'll be creating a function. For example, first I need to create a file, right? Let me do that. 6.py. Okay, first I will tell what's the local scope. Def fun. It's just a simple function. I'm not going to give very detailed examples so that you won't be get confused at this stage. Print x. Okay, if I want to call that function like this, right? Python 6.py. Okay, I was able to print that. So I have this variable here, right? Now what I will try to do is print x. I have this variable here, right? Why can't I print that variable? Let me check that. What happened? Yeah. See, what is it saying? Name error. It's throwing an exception saying that name x is not defined because the x variable is within this scope, which is nothing but local scope to this function, not in the global scope. Now the same thing I will put at the global level, which is nothing but above the function. Okay, I need to be following indentation, guys, otherwise it throws an error saying that indentation not followed. Let me show you that. If I don't follow indentation, it will throw an error. See, on the first line itself I didn't have indentation, so it is throwing an error saying that indentation error, right? Python is very strict on these guys. It will throw a single issue also. Okay, let me run this program. See this, I have that variable at the global level. That's the reason I was able to use that that specific variable within the function and outside the function also. This is nothing but the scope. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so far we had discussed about different things related to the variables and how to use them, etc. and so on, right? Now, what are the best practices that we have to follow for variable naming? First thing is descriptive names. Choosing the best name is very crucial, guys, while you are writing the program. For example, if you are writing a program which talks about server check, which checks the server status, right? For example, maybe you are using shutil library to connect to a server and ping for specific time, like maybe for every few minutes or every few seconds, and get the status of that. Maybe you are sending some file to a server, maybe you are doing some job. So in that case, if you are just checking a server status, let's say ping, right? In that case, you have to give variable name like server underscore status. Server underscore status, right? This is very clear name. If I give variable name like x, what does that mean? How you can understand that this variable is talking about something, right? If you give name like this, something like server status, by looking at the name itself, you should be able to understand what that specific thing or specific variable will be holding, right? You don't need to look at the code. By looking at the variable itself, you should be able to understand what that variable is, right? That's the reason we have to use descriptive names and meaningful names. If you don't follow these things, you will be in problem down the line. Maybe initially while you are writing the code, you will be in good shape, but while you are reviewing your code, or your manager or your team lead is reviewing your code, then you will face problems saying that what is this name, why did you give this name, like that you will be getting the questions from your peers. Okay, be careful on that. Avoiding keywords, this is very crucial, guys. For example, if you want to use the variable name, you should not use variable name something like true, false, okay, if, else, which are keywords. There are certain keywords which are available in Python, for example while, for, something like this. You should not use these keywords for your variable names, okay. That's one of the final final best practice. Okay, that's pretty much from my side, guys, for this video. I will come up with a new video in the next coming days. Stay tuned to my channel.